The clinking of crystal flutes stopped dead. Sneering wealthy patrons froze as 6 men in tailored suits flooded the Michelin-starred dining room. Seattle's most ruthless underworld boss walked straight past the mayor and the terrified millionaires and knelt directly into the spilled soup beside a ragged, shivering homeless man. "Father," he whispered. The freezing November wind howled off Elliott Bay, whipping rain and sleet against the towering glass windows of the Windermere room. Inside, it was another world entirely. The air smelled of white truffle, expensive French oak, and the subtle metallic tang of generational wealth. It was the kind of establishment where a single dinner cost more than a month's rent in Rainier Valley. Maya Sorensen stood near the mahogany host stand, smoothing the apron of her pristine uniform. At 24, she was drowning in medical debt, working double shifts to keep her younger sister in a specialized care unit at Harborview Medical Center. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She couldn't even afford to make a mistake. It was precisely 8:15 p.m. when the heavy brass-trimmed doors pushed open, letting in a violent gust of freezing rain. The man who walked in didn't belong. He was elderly, his back slightly hunched under a soaking, moth-eaten wool coat. His gray hair was matted to his forehead, and his shoes were held together with duct tape, peeling away at the soles. He stood dripping onto the Persian runner, trembling violently, a fistful of wet, crumpled dollar bills and loose change clutched in his dirt-stained hands. The reaction from the dining room was immediate. Warren and Diane Whitmore, heirs to a sprawling Pacific Northwest real estate empire, sat at the nearest corner booth. Diane recoiled, pressing a silk napkin to her nose. "Good Lord, the smell," she complained loudly, making sure her voice carried. "Are there no standards left in this city? We are eating, for heaven's sake." Nathaniel, the uptight head waiter, rushed forward like a startled hawk. Sir, you cannot be in here. This is a private establishment. You need to leave immediately." The old man didn't raise his voice. He didn't act erratic or unstable. He simply looked at Nathaniel with a pair of piercing, astonishingly calm blue eyes. "I saw the fire in the hearth," he rasped, his voice like dry gravel. "I have money. $6.40. I just wanted a bowl of hot soup. Please. It's so cold outside." $6 wouldn't buy you a glass of tap water in this room," Warren sneered from his table, swirling a $400 glass of Pinot Noir. "Call the police, Nathaniel. He's trespassing." Nathaniel grabbed the old man's wet sleeve, roughly pulling him toward the door. The man stumbled, dropping his coins, which scattered across the polished hardwood and rolled beneath the luxury tables. A few patrons chuckled. The cruelty in the room was palpable, heavy, suffocating. "Stop!" The word left Maya's mouth before she could stop herself. Her heart hammered as every eye in the restaurant snapped toward her. Nathaniel glared, his face flushing with anger. "Maya, get back to your station. Now." But Maya couldn't. She looked at the old man, shivering, staring down at his scattered pennies with a profound, quiet dignity that broke her heart. She stepped forward, ignoring Nathaniel, and gently placed her hand on his freezing shoulder. "I'll cover his meal," Maya said, her voice shaking but resolute. Nathaniel leaned in, his voice a venomous hiss. "Are you insane? The manager will fire you on the spot. You can't seat a vagrant in the dining room." "Then seat him in my section, at the back corner near the kitchen," Maya replied, pulling her own worn wallet from her apron. She pulled out a $50 bill, money meant for her electric bill. "Put in an order for the French onion soup and the roasted chicken, and a pot of black coffee." Nathaniel snatched the bill, eyes narrowing. "You're done after tonight, Maya. Pack your locker when your shift ends." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. She had just lost her lifeline. But as she guided the old man to a small, hidden table, away from the glaring eyes of the crowd, she knew she couldn't have done anything else. She brought him a stack of hot towels first, then the steaming coffee. "Thank you, child," the man whispered, wrapping his frozen hands around the porcelain mug. "It's okay," Maya smiled gently. "Take your time. Nobody's going to throw you out." As she served him, Maya noticed strange details about the man, who gave his name as Elias. His coat was ruined, yes, but beneath the grime, his posture was impossibly straight. On his left wrist, mostly hidden by a frayed sleeve, was a flash of metal, heavy, antique, expensive. And the way he ate wasn't like a starving man tearing into a meal. It was methodical, polite, almost aristocratic. You shouldn't have risked your livelihood for me, Elias said quietly as she cleared his empty bowl. People like those up front, they only respect power. They don't understand grace. Everyone deserves to be warm, Elias, Maya said softly. He looked at her, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. What's your name, my dear? Maya, Maya, he repeated, tasting the syllables. A light in the dark. I won't forget you. She smiled, thinking it was just the sweet rambling of a broken man. She had no idea her simple act of humanity was about to shake the tectonic plates of Seattle's criminal underworld. It happened just before 9:30. The dinner rush was winding down, and Maya was mentally calculating how she'd pay rent now that she was officially fired. The Whitmores were loudly ordering their third bottle of wine, celebrating a recent corporate merger, their laughter grating against her frayed nerves. Suddenly, the heavy front doors didn't just open, they were shoved apart with violent force. The wind howled into the lobby, but nobody felt the cold. They were too paralyzed by the men who walked in. There were 6 of them, dressed in immaculately tailored midnight blue suits, moving with terrifying coordinated precision. 2 locked the front doors behind them, flipping the deadbolts, hands resting casually inside their jackets. 2 more moved to block the kitchen exits. The restaurant fell into a deathly silence. The clinking of forks, the jazz music, the arrogant laughter, all of it evaporated. Then the man leading them stepped fully into the light. It was Marcus Kade. Even Maya, who paid no attention to the news, knew that face. Marcus Kade was the head of the Kade Syndicate, a shadow organization that controlled the Seattle waterfront, the underground casinos, and a massive share of real estate up and down the coast. He was a ghost to the police, untouchable, ruthless, and terrifyingly handsome. 32, dark hair swept back, a jawline cast in granite, eyes as cold and blue as a winter ocean. The restaurant manager, Mr. Dunning, scrambled out of his office, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Mr. Kade," he stammered. We didn't expect you. Your usual private room isn't prepped, but I can have it cleared in." Marcus held up a single-gloved hand. Dunning snapped his mouth shut instantly. Marcus didn't look at him. His gaze swept slowly across the terrified dining room. He wasn't here for a shakedown. He wasn't here for dinner. He was hunting Warren Whitmore. Perhaps too drunk on expensive wine and his own ego, stood up from his booth. "Listen here, Kade. I don't care who you think you are, but my wife and I are trying to enjoy a quiet evening, and between the filthy vagrant they let in earlier and your theatrics, this place is becoming a circus." One of Marcus's men stepped forward, hand slipping into his jacket, but Marcus stopped him with a subtle twitch of his fingers. He turned his head slowly toward Warren. "Sit down," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it resonated with a lethal, vibrating menace that made the hair on the back of Maya's neck stand up. Warren opened his mouth to argue, but Diane frantically yanked his sleeve, her face drained of color. He sat. Marcus resumed his scan. Then his eyes landed on the back corner, on the small table near the kitchen, on the old man in the wet, ruined coat. His cold, unreadable expression shattered. The ruthless Mafia boss, a man rumored to have dismantled rival syndicates without blinking, suddenly looked like a desperate, terrified child. He sprinted past the luxury booths, ignoring the millionaires and the cowering staff. When he reached the table, Marcus didn't pull out a chair. He didn't stand over the old man. He dropped straight to his knees on the hard floor. The entire restaurant gasped in collective shock. Maya, standing a few feet away with a water pitcher trembling in her hands, froze. Marcus reached out, hands shaking, and gently grasped the old man's dirty, calloused hands. "Father," he choked out, his voice thick with raw emotion. "Jesus Christ, Father, we've been looking for you for 3 days. Half the city's been tearing the streets apart." Elias looked down at the feared crime lord. The old man's cloudy gaze seemed to sharpen, snapping back into focus. "Marcus," he said softly, "you found me." "Why did you leave the estate?" Marcus asked, stripping off his cashmere overcoat and wrapping it around Elias's shivering shoulders. "The gates were locked. The guards." "The house felt like a tomb, Mark," Elias whispered, a profound sadness in his voice. "I just wanted to take a walk, to remember what the city felt like. But the streets, they've changed. My mind got clouded. The rain started, and I lost my way." Elias Kade wasn't just a homeless man. He was the former patriarch of the Kade family, the man who had built the empire his son now ruled. 3 years earlier, after his beloved wife passed away Elias's mind had begun to slip. He'd gone into quiet seclusion at a heavily guarded estate above the Sound. He'd slipped out during a shift change, wandering the freezing streets in a state of confused grief, stripped of his wallet and phone by muggers along the way. Marcus pressed his forehead against his father's hands. "You're safe now. I'm taking you home." He stood, helping Elias to his feet, and as he did, his gaze fell on the table, the empty bowl of soup, the coffee, the folded warm towels. Then his lethal blue eyes shifted to Nathaniel, who was trying to shrink into the wallpaper. "Who served him?" Marcus demanded. His voice was no longer that of a relieved son. It was the voice of the boss. Nathaniel trembled so violently he could barely speak. I tried to tell her not to, Mr. Kade. I swear I tried to kick him out, but she insisted." Marcus's gaze darkened. "You tried to kick him out? Yes. No, Elias placed a gentle hand on his son's arm. "Marcus, stop. That man was cruel. The people up front were cruel." He turned and pointed a shaking finger at Warren and Diane Whitmore. "Those people mocked me, wanted me thrown out into the ice." Marcus looked at them, and the look in his eyes was a death sentence. Warren whimpered, sliding down into his booth. But Elias continued, steadying his voice, and turned to point directly at Maya. "That girl, she paid for my meal with her own money. She defied her boss to show me mercy when I had nothing." Marcus turned to Maya. She stood frozen, the heavy pitcher slipping in her sweaty grip, staring into the face of Seattle's most dangerous man. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. Tall, broad-shouldered, radiating an intoxicating mix of danger and authority. He stepped slowly toward her, the air between them pulling tight, crackling. He stopped inches away, glanced at her faded name tag, then up into her wide, terrified hazel eyes. For the first time since walking through the door, the ice in his eyes melted. He looked at her not as a waitress, but as something rare. "You did this?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rumble. "You protected my father." Maya swallowed hard. He was cold. It was just soup. Marcus stared at her mouth, then back to her eyes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick platinum money clip. He didn't count it. He pressed the entire stack, easily $10,000, into her apron pocket. "No," Maya gasped, stepping back. "I can't take that. I didn't do it for money." "I know you didn't," he interrupted softly, leaning close enough that she caught his cologne, sandalwood and dark spice. "That's exactly why you're taking it. In my world, loyalty and mercy are the only currencies that matter." He held her gaze for 3 agonizing, breathless seconds. Maya felt a sudden, dangerous pull in her chest. She had never been looked at like that by a man before, like she was suddenly the center of his universe. Marcus stepped back, his demeanor turning to ice again as he looked at the manager. "Dunning. Yes, Mr. Kade. This woman is the only reason I'm not burning this entire establishment to the ground tonight. She doesn't work for you anymore." Nathaniel sneered quietly in the background, thinking Maya was finally getting what she deserved. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked straight at her, jaw tight, eyes burning. "She works for me now." The transition from a struggling waitress drowning in debt to an essential fixture within Seattle's most powerful crime family happened with dizzying speed. Within 48 hours of the incident at the Windermere Room, Maya's life was unrecognizable. Marcus Kade did not make requests. He orchestrated reality to suit his needs. When he learned through his network about Maya's younger sister, Sophie, and the crushing medical bills at Harborview, he acted with terrifying efficiency. He didn't just pay the debt. He had Sophie transferred to a private top-floor recovery suite attended by the finest specialists on the West Coast. In exchange, Maya's new title was deceptively simple: personal companion to Elias Kade. She moved into the Kade estate, a sprawling stone fortress hidden behind iron gates above the Sound. The wealth was staggering: vaulted ceilings, Renaissance art, a fleet of black SUVs idling in the driveway. But Maya focused entirely on Elias. She wasn't a nurse, but she provided the one thing the medical staff couldn't: genuine, unvarnished warmth. She read to him in the sunroom, played endless games of chess, listened to his fragmented but fascinating stories of building the Kade empire. Under her gentle care, the fog that had pushed him into the freezing rain began to lift. But as Maya bonded with the father, she found herself increasingly drawn to the son. Marcus was a man wrapped in violence and shadow. Yet around Maya, the icy armor he wore for the underworld cracked. They began sharing quiet moments in the estate's mahogany-paneled library after Elias went to sleep. One rainy Tuesday, Maya found Marcus standing by the roaring fireplace, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey. He looked exhausted, tie discarded, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the edge of a dark tattoo along his collarbone. "You're working late," Maya said softly, pausing at the threshold. Marcus turned, his piercing blue eyes catching the firelight. The weight of his empire seemed to vanish the second he looked at her. "The docks are causing problems. A rival family out of Portland, the Dravens, are trying to muscle in on our shipping lanes." He shook his head. "But that doesn't matter right now. Come here." Maya stepped in, her heart doing the familiar, dangerous flutter it always did when Marcus focused solely on her. "My father laughed today," he said, his voice dropping to a low timbre. "I haven't heard that sound since my mother died." "You did that, Maya. He just needed someone to listen," she replied, looking down at her hands. "He's a brilliant man." Marcus closed the distance between them, the scent of sandalwood, whiskey, and rain clinging to him. He reached out, calloused fingers tilting her chin up until her eyes met his. "You act as if you haven't performed a miracle," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "You saved him that night at the restaurant, and I think you're saving me too." Maya's breath hitched. "Marcus, I know," he interrupted gently, thumb tracing her jaw. "You're terrified of my world." "You should be, but I swear to you, Maya, I will burn this city to the ground before I let anything hurt you." It was a vow, sealed with an unspoken magnetic tension that pulled them together. But even as Maya let herself lean into his touch, the shadows outside the estate were gathering. The underworld doesn't respect peace, and Marcus's enemies were looking for a vulnerability. They found one, and the betrayal came from the most unlikely of places. Warren Whitmore had never forgotten the humiliation of cowering before Marcus. Stripped of his pride, he sought out Victor Draven, the ruthless head of the Portland Syndicate. Whitmore had deep pockets and City Hall connections. Draven had the muscle. Together, they plotted to hit Marcus where it would destroy him completely, his father. The trap was sprung on a crisp Thursday afternoon. Elias had a scheduled checkup at a highly secure private neurology clinic outside Bellevue. Usually Marcus oversaw the security detail himself, but a manufactured crisis at the docks, a diversion engineered by Draven's men, pulled him away. He left Maya and Elias with 4 of his best men, a seemingly impenetrable guard. It wasn't enough. Maya was sitting in the clinic's plush waiting room, fetching Elias a cup of tea, when the heavy glass doors shattered under a hail of suppressed gunfire. Panic erupted. The receptionist screamed as 2 of Marcus's guards were instantly neutralized by a tactical strike team in black gear. 6 heavily armed men flooded the lobby. "Elias, get down!" Maya screamed, abandoning the tea and launching herself across the room. She tackled the elderly man to the marble floor, just as bullets chewed through the plaster wall behind them. "Maya, what's happening?" Elias gasped, disoriented by the sudden violence. "We have to move, now." Maya's instincts, honed by years of scraping by, kicked into overdrive. While the 2 remaining Kade guards returned fire, buying precious seconds, she grabbed Elias's arm and dragged him down a narrow hallway. She remembered the clinic's layout from their previous visits, shoved him into a heavy lead-lined X-ray room, and slammed the reinforced steel door shut, engaging the biometric deadbolt just as heavy boots pounded down the corridor. "Open the door, little girl," a brutal voice barked from the other side, punctuated by a rifle butt against steel. "Give us the old man and we might let you walk." Maya backed away, pushing Elias behind the heavy imaging machinery, and pulled out the emergency panic phone Marcus had given her, a direct line to his personal encrypted cell. Her hands shook as she pressed the single button. It rang once. "Maya?" Marcus's voice was sharp, tight with tension. "Marcus, they're at the clinic," she choked out, tears finally spilling. "Men in black gear. We're locked in the X-ray room, but they're trying to breach the door." Dead silence on the line. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer human. It was the voice of the devil himself. "I'm 3 minutes away. Get on the floor. Cover your ears." The line went dead. Outside the door, the banging stopped. Maya heard the unmistakable hiss of a cutting torch sparking to life. The steel door began to glow a violent, angry red. Elias squeezed her hand, his cloudy blue eyes remarkably calm. "My son is coming, Maya. Do not fear." 2 minutes passed. The door's hinges were melting. Then the clinic erupted into absolute hell. Even through the lead-lined walls, Maya could hear the deafening roar of automatic gunfire, the shattering of glass, the agonized screams of Draven's men. It wasn't a firefight. It was an execution. Marcus hadn't just brought backup. He had brought the full, terrifying wrath of the Kade Syndicate. The cutting torch stopped. A heavy thud echoed as a body was thrown against the outside of their door, sliding to the floor. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. "Maya!" It was Marcus, muffled through the steel, the frantic edge in his voice unmistakable. "Maya, open the door." She scrambled forward and threw the deadbolt. Marcus stood in the hallway, surrounded by the devastation of Draven's strike team, his tailored suit splattered with blood, knuckles bruised, a custom handgun gripped tightly in his hand. His chest heaved as his wild eyes scanned the room and locked onto her. He dropped the gun. Marcus crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees and pulling Maya into a crushing, desperate embrace. He buried his face in her neck, his hands shaking as they gripped her back. "You're safe," he rasped, voice breaking. "God, Maya, if I had lost you." Maya wrapped her arms around his shoulders, burying her face against his chest, finally letting herself break down. "We're okay," she sobbed. "I kept him safe." Elias stood slowly, leaning against the machinery, watching his son with a soft, knowing smile. He had built an empire of blood and shadow, but in Maya, he saw the light that would finally save his family. Marcus pulled back just enough to frame Maya's face in his blood-stained hands. He didn't care about the carnage outside. He didn't care about the empire. "I am never letting you out of my sight again," he vowed fiercely. "You are mine, Maya, my heart, my queen." Before she could answer, he kissed her. Deep, bruising, tasting of adrenaline and desperate, undeniable love. Maya kissed him back, anchoring herself to the most dangerous man in Seattle, knowing she was the only one who held his heart. In the weeks that followed, the Seattle underworld was purged. Victor Draven disappeared without a trace. Warren Whitmore's real estate empire was hostily acquired by Kade shell companies, leaving the arrogant millionaire bankrupt and fleeing the state in disgrace. Maya Sorensen, the waitress who had sacrificed her last $50 to buy a freezing homeless man a bowl of soup, never worried about a bill again. She stood at the pinnacle of the city, a queen in a gilded cage of her own choosing, fiercely loved by the Mafia boss, who had found his humanity in her mercy.